That was until Michelle Bullock said no. Joining us live now, our Wednesday panel, the Assistant Citizenship Minister Julian Hill and the National Senator M.Canavan stepping in today. Julian, so we'll start with you here. Was it the right call from Michelle Bullock?
Oh, you're not going to be surprised, mate, that I'm not going to second-guess the Reserve Bank. You know, if we'd been talking yesterday, I would have said we're not going to make a prediction. The Reserve Bank's independent. There's millions of Australians that, of course, would have wanted a mortgage cut, and the markets were wrong in their betting overwhelmingly this time. We'll get a better idea of the bank's detail of their thinking when the minutes come out. But I'll just make a couple of points. The Governor Bullock, was pretty clear. I'm not trying to verbal her, but that was the sentiment I think that everyone took from the initial remarks, that it's a question of timing, it's not a question of if. The fight against inflation, you know, people could say is not absolutely finished. You can't declare victory, but inflation's coming down, wages are rising, the economy's growing, and that's why we've already seen two interest rate cuts this year. I think savings about $160 for an average family on $500,000. So, of course, most of us would have loved to see an interest rate cut yesterday, but we'll be watching the next meeting given the Governor's signals.
What do you reckon, Matt? Was she right to wait for more data, or do you think it's already there, that a third of the country, those with mortgages, should be given more of a break?
Well, there's too much focus just on one meeting here, Peter. The issue is the longer-term trend where Australians have not received the kind of interest rate cuts that we've seen in other countries. So, yes, it would have been better for families to have that $100-odd saving per month yesterday, but over the life of this government, they're paying, an average homeowner is paying $12,000 more on their mortgage every year. That's a lot of money, and they're not seeing the interest rate cuts we're getting in other countries because this government has presided over the worst productivity performance in our nation's history, and it's not even close. The productivity's fallen by 5% in the first term of this government. The previous largest three-year decline was just 0.5%, so 10 times worse under this government. And finally, they've woken up and are having now a productivity roundtable after failing to invite the Productivity Commission to their Jobs and Skills Summit in the first few months of their government. It's a little too late. And all we seem to be getting from the government right now are more proposals for tax increases. Nothing that I can see that is actually going to reverse this terrible productivity performance, which the RBA has identified as one of the key reasons why interest rates cannot fall faster.
OK. Julian, are you making things worse?
No, well, I think the focus last term, and I think Matt and most people, if they're honest, would agree with that, was getting inflation down. You know, cost of living pressures and getting inflation down was the primary economic focus of the government, given the mess we inherited. Deficits, debt, inflation was rising. Inflation was, peaked at 8% soon after the previous election, and it's now down within the Reserve Bank's target range. And the Treasurer has been clear that the central economic challenge this term is exactly what Matt said. It's productivity. But I don't think, if Matt says take a longer-term view, take a longer-term view. Productivity in this country has been flatlining or going back for a decade or more. That's the truth of it. And it's an economic challenge.
It hasn't fallen like it has in the last few years.
Just finish.
I made the points about the Productivity Commission.
Just wait, Matt.
A total and utter mess.
Just finish your point, Julian.
Government. We inherited a total mess. We had deficits, we had debt out of control, we had interest rates and inflation way too high in terms of inflation. That's why the Reserve Bank acted. I'll make the final point. Interest rates are coming down. Inflation is now back within the target band. We've delivered two surpluses and close to a balanced budget this year. Real wages are growing when real wages are falling, and I agree with Matt. Productivity is the central economic challenge.
Budget
but I'm not going to blame him. It's ridiculous to blame one side of politics alone for a shared challenge.
Yeah, I think budget costs are going to be blowing out now. I mean, Julian does have the point, though, doesn't he, Matt, that productivity's been a problem for 10 plus years?
It just hasn't declined like this in the last 3 years, and so it was stagnant for about a decade, and now it's just fallen off a cliff. And look, I've been critical of my own side of politics on these things before too. I think we spent too much during the COVID years. I said that at the time on your show, Peter. I've been critical at my own side of politics adoption of too much intermittent, unreliable renewable energy. A big reason for our productivity fall is because we have now some of the highest electricity prices in the world. Energy is so important to an economy. And we have the world's best energy resources. We just won't use them. We export them to our competitors, but we won't use them. And now we have the absurd situation of having to bail out our high energy using smelters and factories because we won't let them use the energy resources that other countries can. So we've got to get serious here about this issue. I've been talking about this for years. I raised the issue of the Productivity Commission not being invited to the Jobs and Skills Summit 3 years ago. And instead, Julian just said his focus was to reduce inflation the first 3 years. Well, why did the government preside over the biggest spending budgets outside of COVID since the days of Kevin Rudd? They increased spending by $44 billion in their first 2 budgets from policy decisions alone. We hadn't seen that kind of stimulus since the global financial crisis. Why throw that extra spending on the inflation fire? That's why we ended up with some of the highest inflation rates in the developed world for much longer and higher interest rates now than many other countries have got.
Gents, I'm out of time, but I do want to get your response, a quick response if I can each, just on Donald Trump threatening to smash pharma overnight. Big stick. Could face 200% tariffs if we don't move to the United States. I mean, look, we've already got CSL there, but, I mean, this would be a threat to others. Julian, to you first. Have we got to move more companies to the US to avoid this tax, or do we just diversify now?
Yeah, look, 2 points. The government's been clear, calm, consistent that, in our view, the tariffs that the US are imposing are an act of economic self-harm. There's no surprise President Trump has a different view on global trade policy. It's a view he's held for a very long time, 2 decades or more, and that's the view that the United States government are implementing. But we continue to maintain our view that this is not in the interest of the global trading system and not in the interest of the US. With respect to pharma, I saw that report in the ABC this morning. You just need to unpick it, because I think the headline was about $2.2 billion of exports or thereabouts. That includes a whole range of things which materials and that which we export, which are then re-engineered. So we're talking about a hypothetical set of tariffs on a very complicated bucket of goods that would not be applied equally. Let's just take this one step at a time. But the final thing I'll just say on this, and I think Matt would agree with me, the Prime Minister, the government's drawn 2 very clear red lines on trade negotiations. We're not negotiating on the PBS, and we're not negotiating on biosecurity for our farmers and agricultural industries.
Just a quick...
this has a way to run.
Quick 30 seconds, Matt.
Well, you're probably best just not to overreact to the statements of President Trump. We'll see what happens over time. And look, there is a lot of focus on the US, but one thing I think there should be more focus on is, look, we still pay a 25% tariff for our beef going to Japan, even though we have a free trade agreement with them. So it's strange to me there's all this focus on the US, but we very, very rarely mention the fact there are a lot of trade barriers in our region that are higher than what we face under President Trump.
All right, Julie and Matt, good to have you with us this morning. We'll chat again next week. Well, coming up on the program...
We get a lot of thrown at